wonderful humans, and welcome back to my channel. As you can see, I am still back at my parents'. We've got a lovely Christmas tree with us today. I thought let's get a little bit festive. Although to be honest, my topic is not festive, as today I want to talk to you all about how to choose a good PhD supervisor. Let's get on with the video. Now, if you've watched some of my previous videos, you will see I've already told you how to find potential PhD supervisors. I've talked about how to kind of go through the process of applying for a PhD, how to write a proposal. But one thing I felt I hadn't covered yet was how can you tell a good supervisor for you from a bad supervisor for you? And as I said, I think there's 5 things that come into this. So 1, are they an expert in your research topic? The first thing you want to do is you want to look at their research. Does their expertise, their current research interests align with your proposed PhD topic? For me, I knew I wanted someone who was looking at romance or someone who looked at queer things. And part of the reason I chose my current supervisor, Dr. Amy Burge, is because she specialised in romance, and okay, she didn't have queer things, but I could tell she really knew her stuff about romance scholarship, and for me, I felt that was the more niche area of my topic. She had also done things on sexuality and gender, so although she hadn't necessarily looked at queer stuff in that way, she knew about some of the topics I was doing. So that meant it felt like she was a really good fit. And for me, that was super important because I think of my 2 kind of topics, the romance was the more niche one, and the one that I felt potentially if I went with a queer theorist or someone who specialised in queer culture or queer literature or queer popular culture, the romance side might lessen a bit and it might become less significant because they wouldn't understand it. 2, what projects have they supervised before? The second thing you want to look at is who have they previously supervised, what type of projects have they previously supervised, and how does that connect to what you want to do? Now, the reason it's useful and important to look at their previous kind of supervision or their current things that they are supervising, because it gives you an idea of the type of projects they're interested in accepting. This obviously links back into the kind of research idea, but if you can see who their current supervisor students are, their previous PhD projects that they've successfully brought to completion, it gives you an idea that they have some experience with this. It gives you an idea of what they have experience in supervising, and that can be really beneficial. Now, I would put a caveat to this. If they are an earlier researcher or a newer kind of researcher who is still establishing themselves in their field, they might not have as many supervisions under their belt. That does not mean they will be bad at it. In some ways, they might be better at it because they will have gone through it themselves more recently and they will be more familiar with the process from that perspective. And I think that is equally as important. So although this is useful to look at and it can tell you things about them as a supervisor, about the kind of projects they're interested in, if they haven't got a lot, if they don't have many, or potentially any, don't let it put you off if you still get really good vibes from them from other places. For example, my supervisor Amy only had 1 PhD supervisor under her belt, and I felt confident enough in her and I got a really good vibe from her that I was happy to go ahead with it. 3, how active are they in their field? Now again, this kind of links into, or this point kind of links into research, but I think it's important to look at how active someone is in their field. Are they going to conferences? Are they attending articles? Are they engaging with the wider community, be that on Twitter or through co-authoring articles or through attending conferences? What do they have, usually on their university staff page, that lets you know that they're engaging with a wider community of romance or whatever your topic is? Now, the reason this is important is because even if someone is super engaged in their research, part of being a PhD is you have to network. And that's the honest truth. So the more connections your supervisor has, the more tapped in they are to the community of academics that you eventually want to be working in, the better it is for you. Now, again, this isn't a make and break because obviously as a PhD student, if you know one of your strengths is I'm great at networking, I'm really good at reaching out to people, I'm great at forming connections, this might not be as big a concern for you because you're like, I can do that by myself. If, however, you're someone who's like, actually, no, I'd like that support, I want someone who clearly is quite good at networking who can maybe teach me, this could be more important for you. And really, this is something only yourself can decide. I, for example, knew that Amy was quite involved in the wider academic community because she was on the editorial committee for the Journal of Popular Romance Studies. She had written articles. I know she'd attended conferences, so I knew she was quite tapped into the academic world that I want to eventually go into myself. And for me, that was a real plus point. 4, What is their university like? Now, this might sound a little strange, but I think the university an academic is at can be very important to the type of supervisor or the type of opportunities you will be offered. Now, the reason for this is because as a PhD student, you are not doing a PhD in isolation. You are doing it with all the other PhD students in your department who are doing one. You are working alongside academics, you are working alongside postgraduates. And if your supervisor or the supervisor you're thinking of works at a university that has a really strong research area in your topic, that can be super beneficial. For example, part of the massive appeal at Birmingham was because I knew they were one of the few universities in the world, and certainly within the UK, that was really developing this expertise within romance, that was really supporting and encouraging of romance research and really wanted to kind of elevate romance research and create a real hub of research at the University of Birmingham. And that's so important because it means that you are working alongside people who get your research, you're working alongside people who understand what you're trying to do, who are enthusiastic when you suggest projects like starting a reading group, starting a network, forming a conference, and all these kind of things. And you kind of need both academics and PhD students on your side to really make stuff like that happen. So I think it's important to remember that your supervisor is not going to be the only academic that you work with, and therefore when considering potential supervisors, look at the environment they themselves are in. Look at how they are encouraging or creating or part of a kind of research community within your field within the department, because I think that's just as important and useful. Number 5, do you like their personality? What I mean by this is it's still really common as a PhD student to go for an interview. And in that interview, it can feel really scary and overwhelming. I know for mine, I was very like, whoa, what am I doing? This is crazy. But it's really important to remember that in that moment, you are also interviewing them. Do you get a good vibe from them? Do you think this is someone that you can work with? Is this someone you like? Is this someone who seems respectful, who seems to have good emotional intelligence, who seems like they will be encouraging, who seems like someone that you want to work with quite closely for the next 3 years? Now, I think this is something a lot of PhD students overlook, and they often go for status and kind of the grandeur of their PhD person. They want to go for the person who has the most articles under their belt, the most prestige within their field. But I'm telling you, as someone who has friends who picked supervisors based on that criteria, it does not always work out. And it is 100% better to have a PhD supervisor who supports you, encourages you, is 100% in your corner, is someone you get on with, is someone who you can work well with, over someone who maybe you don't like that much, but they're prestigious. Because if you don't like your PhD supervisor, or you have completely different ways of working, or there isn't honestly that mutual respect there, that can create a really toxic environment to do your PhD in. And that's not an environment that anybody should have to put up with as a PhD person, or frankly is an environment that many people will thrive under as a PhD student. And at the end of the day, if you've got a supervisor who is in your corner, who is super supportive, who understands that you will sometimes need to take breaks, who has high emotional intelligence, and is just frankly someone that you can get on with, your whole PhD process will be so much better. You will probably come out with a better PhD topic and thesis because you have been in a supportive, encouraging environment. And don't just consider this for your main supervisors, think about your secondary supervisors as well. Because at the end of the day, you're going to be a team, you're going to be working together to get your thesis done. And yes, you as the PhD student will be doing the bulk of the work, but at the end of the day, this is a team effort. And if not everybody is on board or supportive on that team, it can become very difficult very quickly to keep morale up, let's say. So I think it's really important to consider the personalities of the supervisors. And again, this is something you won't really know until you potentially go for an interview, or I suppose you could stalk them on social media. I'm not condoning that, but it might give you an insight into their personality, although obviously social media is not 100% accurate. But I just think that is something that gets overlooked a lot by PhD students, and it really shouldn't be because it's super important. And I know a lot of people who really didn't look into this aspect of their PhD, and some of them got lucky and some of them didn't. And it was something that I definitely looked for. And as soon as I met Amy, I got a really good vibe from her. I got a great vibe from the emails. We get on super well. The same with Deborah. And it's made my whole experience so much better and so much easier. And I just feel like I can talk to them about my problems without it being a thing, if that makes sense. So those are my 5 tips for how to kind of assess if a supervisor is the right one for you. Hopefully you found this video useful. As always, if you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them down below, or DM me or message me on Instagram. It's at PhD Life with Lucy. I'm more active on there, so if you want a more immediate response, that's maybe the place to go. And this is probably going to be my last video before Christmas, because I'm going to take Christmas off, so you won't get a video next Sunday. I hope that's okay. I'll be back in the new year, and I wish you all a very wonderful festive season and good luck with your PhDs, and I'll see you in the new year. Bye.